Hey, welcome back to the What the Wealthy Do podcast, where we pull back the curtain on the strategies the wealthy use to build their wealth and show you how to make those same moves on your own personal wealth building journey. I'm your host, Stephanie Dorsey, CEO and co-founder of Margins Capital, an investment firm focused on providing women and people of color access to an institutional quality portfolio of alternative assets. We are back from our holiday hiatus. It is Black History Month 2026. I have on 2 chains, faux bracelets, and we are doing something a little bit different this month. I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite conversations with young Black leaders in finance. And my hope is to show you how we are everywhere fighting the good fight for our community. First up is a 2-part conversation with Yashnica Mothersil, a rock star Gen Zer who works for Apollo Global Management, a $26 billion with a B, asset management company. Listen to her talk about her journey of how she got to where she is and the lack of representation she is still looking for along the way. How about you walk us through your story, like starting actually from the beginning, wherever you want to start, but certainly not today. I would like people to know a little bit more about you.
Of course. No, a while ago now. I graduated from the University of Virginia and I majored in economics, thinking that I was going to go into the international economic development route. I'm Haitian of descent. I am West Indian. So I was always attracted to understanding international economies, and particularly those that are in the developing areas. So I thought I was going to work for the World Bank or the IMF. But I also had a particular interest in criminal law. So those 2 particular interests was constantly competing all through high school and college. And then when I graduated from college, I moved to New York from Virginia and landed a role working for a coordinating discovery attorney in New York. So my primary
in the criminal space or
criminal law. So the primary role there was to help process large voluminous amounts of discovery for CJ attorneys, criminal justice act attorneys for federal cases that are multi-defendant in nature. Mm-hmm. So these were mostly RICO cases. So there were a lot of heavy, I would say trafficking cases would be an example. We had a lot of those, a lot of gang related.
Trafficking or human trafficking? Because now,
both that would be included. Basically, there were a lot of gang related cases. So all the criminals that are related to gangs were those that we would have. And it was fun because there was a criminal psychology element to it, trying to understand the defendants, which were our clients, from the psychological perspective, but also wanting to help the attorneys provide them with due process and be able to have representation in trial. That was what I did for 2 years. And I did that while I studied for the LSAT, and then eventually went to Howard University School of Law and thought that I was going to be a criminal defense attorney. I thought that, that was the side that won, and I was going to be able to fight for the cause in that way. And then I think within the first year, I was like, oh, you know what, on second thought.
You know why I'm smiling. I'm just like, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, I didn't realize, the life of an attorney is very different from what I had been exposed to, because I was mostly all technology focused. I was the one behind the desk supporting attorneys from a technological perspective.
Yes.
That writing the memos and the briefs and having to deal with the emotional tolls of being client facing, defendant casing all the time, and being the ones to communicate with their families and let them know what's going on, and not, oftentimes be the bearer of very, very depressing bad news, was not something that I thought I can do for the rest of my career. So once I really gave it some serious thought and was like, I'm not really enjoying my classes, I'm in torts, I'm in contracts, and I'm for the first time not really engaged with the material in school. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved school. So I thought that was a big red flag, and I took the plunge and just said, you know what, I think I need to recalibrate and reevaluate what is it that I really want to do. And so I left school and came back home with my, tail between my legs, and said, I don't know what to do now. Because I thought I was always going to be law bound in one way or another, whether I worked with the World Bank or if I worked for a court or for a judge. Either way, I thought, a law degree would be helpful, but it just didn't seem right. So when I came back to New York,
I don't know if I told you this, but that is so brave. What you did is so brave.
You know, people say that, and now I think now that I have some years behind me, I can say the same. For a long time, it was really hard for me to take that L, or at least at
Yeah.
the time I thought it was an L
Yeah.
because I had invested so much time. And like I said, I'm Haitian, so you know, in our family, you only have three options, and then you hear a lot of people say this. A lot of immigrant families, particularly West Indians, say you can only be a doctor, a lawyer, engineer. You're not
Yeah.
one of the three that I don't know what you're doing with yourself because you're just a complete fail. And so for me, I had already ruled out the other two. And I was only left with law. So now that that wasn't working, it was like, oh boy, I was really lost for a long time. And I just so happened to, I was like, I'll just, I paid a lot of money for school. I'm kind of broke at the moment. Let me just get into something. Was sending my resume around and landed a job at a real estate private equity firm here in New York, which was really, really a journey because it was an eye opener. It was a totally different industry,
Yeah.
uh, totally different get down. People walk differently, talk differently,
Yeah.
different language. And that was my introduction into the finance industry. It definitely was not expected. I was not planning on ever being in corporate America. I didn't have my eyesights on that, but that's where I landed. And from there, I've made my way to here. And it couldn't have been a better journey for me. I think it picked me as opposed to me picking it.
Before we talk about where you are now, I want to go back. Can you tell us, what does real estate private equity mean? Like what is
So
a firm that, yeah, what do they do?
it's two, so you could say it's two parts to that real estate private equity. You have the real
Right.
estate part, and you have the private equity part. The private equity part is just basically ownership in private markets, like in a
Yep.
private market asset. So it's not a publicly traded asset like you would get in like a public traded REIT, right? So
Yeah.
uh, basically these are deals done in private transactions,
Yeah.
not in the public market form.
Right.
And then you're dealing with the real estate as a particular asset class. There are several different asset classes that you can transact in the private markets. Real estate is one of them in the real
Yeah.
assets. Sorry if I'm getting a little bit of a glare this sun. It's a great day today, but
I love it. No, you look angelic, girl.
oh, thank you. I try. No. And so real estate private equity is that. It's the transaction of real estate assets in a
Yeah.
private, basically.
So
Um,
wait, did they do them, did that firm focus on those two individual assets separately, or did every deal have a component of private equity and real estate as a part of the deal?
So it was private. So real estate was the asset that was being transaction in private market. So it was like the one asset class was real estate. Now, real estate can be different kinds of, like you can have
Right.
retail, you can have hotels, you
Exactly.
can have multifamily.
Commercial component, and there would be, some type of, not corporate, but like a business component that's operating, like, for instance, margins invested in a vineyard. And so there's a
Mm,
real estate component where we own, we're part owners of the actual land with the grapes, or the farm with the grapes, but
yeah.
on that property is also a event space and a luxury inn. And so that to me is, I get that's real estate private equity, but
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that I understand, and for the people who are watching, they understand. So I guess my question is, like, was it both similar to that vineyard deal, or not necessarily?
Yeah, it was similar. They focused on office, multifamily, and
Got it.
hospitality. So that was their main
Yeah,
focus. And
got it.
there was another firm that we worked along with. The team that I was on would do all of the due diligence. They would spend ample time, so much time and energy and effort collaborating and discussing and talking to brokers and talking to professionals out in the field and to create a model that kind of gave them a better understanding in terms of what the return streams would be on that
Right,
asset.
right.
And then they would put it in a coherent form for the entire investment committee to review
Review.
and to
Yep.
deliberate on. And so I would see all of these memos and I would read them as if I knew what I was reading, when really I was just using it as a primer for me to start to understand. And I would
Yeah.
Google everything and Investopedia everything, and just
Yep.
that was my introduction to finance. I really did not have any understanding of what the financial world or what capital markets or how, I understood economics, but I didn't
Yeah.
never married the two together. I
Mhm.
understood interest rates. I understood, supply and demand curves. But as you know, for those who have taken an economics class, it's very theoretical.
Yes.
Being
Yes.
able to apply it was new to me. And
Yeah.
that was my first time being able to do so.
But you did say something like you learned you learned the different characters and how they operate. And obviously I'm not, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but can you speak very generically about like what you learned in terms of some of the players and how people moved in the financial space in the I guess this was was it post 2008?
This was yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I was still
Oh,
in yeah.
I'm sorry. I
I
forget.
was in grade school during those times.
Don't come for me. Yeah, yeah.
I'm not, I
Tag
promise
along.
I'm not. It's all love.
Okay, but yes, all right. So, can you talk a little bit about how that was different?
I think what I've learned now in retrospect is like everything is a people's business.
Yeah,
And I didn't fully appreciate that at the time. So
yeah,
I was looking at how different a lot of the players that were really making the moves were from me. I lived in
yes,
Brooklyn at the time and I worked in Midtown Manhattan. And so coming from Brooklyn, Crown Heights, which was traditionally, as long as I've known it to be, I grew up in Philly, but my family has been in Crown Heights since the 80s.
yeah,
And back then it was like Caribbean. It's now considered Little Caribbean, but that's all that I've ever known to be there. So
yeah,
coming from Little Caribbean, Flatbush, Brooklyn
yeah.
to Midtown Manhattan every day and recognizing like, hey, I don't see a lot of representation of like me. I don't see anybody like me who are in the decision-making seats. I don't see anybody. No one looked like me in the IC meetings. No one looked like me in the manager roles. No one looked like me in the managing director roles, or no one were on the brochures or on the organizational, the company organization chart that looks like
Yeah,
me. No
yeah,
one.
yeah.
And so understanding it, that was a little different from law. Coming from a criminal,
Right.
again,
I
professional
mean, there's so
criminal law,
many. Yeah, for sure.
where you have you have a little bit more, not, I shouldn't say a lot more because there's disparities all over the place, but a little bit more representation in the
Yeah,
legal front than there were in finance. And so that was
yeah.
the first time that I ever even thought about it. I ever saw it. And it's because I was confronted with it every day. You know what I mean? And so when we're talking about these big numbers and you're talking about investing 8 figures and more, and you're looking at the investor base and you're looking at where they're looking, for the investor base, and you're looking at who they're transacting with, who they're making deals with, it's just like, no one looks like me,
That's
no
a
one looks like
lot of
my dad.
money.
You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And we're not investing $50, $60 here. This is wealth generation. This is wealth
yeah.
growth, really how,
Creation. Yeah.
yeah, it's wealth creation and growth, compounded returns over a long period of time. That's really creating what we would call the power players in finance.
Mhm.
And that was the first time I've ever been in a room with them. You know what I mean? And I wasn't I wasn't in the seat where I could speak, to be quite candid. I wasn't in a
Mhm.
decision-making seat, but it was the first time ever being in the room. And it just was a aha moment that like, okay, this is where some improvements need to be made in terms of having
Mhm.
better representation in the rooms, in finance, in investment capacities. So when we met, actually, if you don't mind me mentioning that, when we met
Please.
at the
Yes.
Black Women in Asset Management Conference, I thought that was absolutely a splendid event because it's very rare that you're going to
Yep.
see to this day in 2024 so many African American women in one place. And the fact that we can all fit into one place is a conversation for a different day. But the fact
Yeah.
that we are able to connect, the fact that we were able to connect and
Yeah.
socialize and network and explain, our identities to one another, our experiences to one another, and kind of lead, guide each other into ways that we feel like could be beneficial to the community, I thought was absolutely exquisite. And
Yeah.
that is very much needed because we are probably, I would say that we have one of the lowest representations across industries. I have a girlfriend, one of my best friends is a is a physician.
Okay.
Shout out to her if she ever watches this video, but she's a physician and she's always complaining about the lack of representation in medicine, which is absolutely correct, right? We
Yeah.
talk about actual doctors, white coats walking in as an African American and then African American woman.
Yeah.
There's definitely a disparity there. But when you talk about finance, I'm like, girlfriend, I think we got you. I think we got you.
I think you might be right. It might be too few to count.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I went to a conference last year and it was a conference for financial advisors. So it's a little bit different of a business, for those who are in financial advisory. And they said something like that. There are less than 3% of financial advisor community is African American. Now, last I checked, we were at least 13% of the population. I think somewhere between 50% or something like that. So that was a jaw-dropping statistic, and I think that more attention needs to be put on that. The disparity of
the numbers are crazy. If you start talking about the venture capital numbers, the people of, I think, they're 0.03% of Black women fund managers.
Yes. And those are the people making the decision in terms of where money is being allocated to. What businesses are going to be funded? Who's going to get the loan? Who's going to get the equity shareholder? So you think about it's on both sides. When we're talking about the investment side, right? The investors who are able to allocate to these funds and be able to benefit from the return stream of these funds, particularly in alternative assets, as we know. For those who don't know, alternative assets are, the way we define it, or way I define it, are base investment transactions outside of the public markets or traditional publicly traded stocks and bonds that typically historically, they tend to yield at least 200 to 300 basis points of spread above public markets in exchange for a little bit of liquidity, right? Alternative investments. So these are a lot of real assets. These are a lot of, private market transactions that we talked about, private equity, private yield, hybrid assets. It could even be paintings. There's commodity trading. There's a whole world of alternatives out there. But we know that there's a disparity of investors who go into alternative investing. And then we know that there's a disparity of entities and companies that are being funded by alternative investing. So double-edged sword here. And, I think, I don't think people want to talk about it because that opens up a large can of worms about a lot of things, history and practices and that it can get spicy. It can get spicy, but it's a necessary conversation.
It can get spicy. It can. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I'm happy that we have young leaders like Yashnica who are showing up in spaces where we aren't traditionally. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you like to consume podcasts. And remember to be the change you want to see.